Hey everybody, this is David Hale Sylvester, and this is the first chapter of my most recent book called One Hug at a Time. I've never done an Audible book before or anything like that, and I'm just sort of just doing a dry run, so please forgive any mistakes or anything like that, and we're gonna learn together, aren't we? So anyway, here is my first chapter called A Simple Hug. Hi, my name is David Hale Sylvester, and I would like to thank you for picking up One Hug at a Time. To explain why I believe this book is necessary right now, let me first tell you what a hug feels like to me. You know the feeling when you find some money in an old pair of jeans, no matter the denomination, $1, $2, $10, $20, even $100. The found bills leave you feeling like you discovered some treasure. Well, that's precisely how I feel when getting a hug or a high five from a passerby. And since 2001, I have traveled through 50 states and 42 countries, amassing over 500,000 pieces of this beautiful treasure. I didn't realize that hugs would become my life currency at the beginning of that year, but on September 11th, embraces became priceless to me. On that day, I believe hugs became more precious to everyone. You see, because without cell phones or social media permeating every aspect of our lives, we didn't look down to a device to provide comfort or community. We instead turned to each other to find some reassurances that our future wasn't as dire as the crumbling Twin Towers made it look. In 2002, I honored my friend Kevin Bowser's life by bicycling all the way from Washington State to Philadelphia, hugging everyone I could, and something happened. The soothing embrace of a nation left me thinking that hugs just might become my new life currency. But at that time, that sounded foolish even to me, so I needed to do some research, and I did so by bicycling from Cairo to Cape Town. The received hugs, smiles, and humanity amplified my Africa trip into a once-in-a-lifetime experience and spurred on visions of me acquiring even more treasure. I bicycled Asia next, and though pedaling from Istanbul to Beijing was much more of a grueling challenge than any other trip I had taken, I returned home wanting even more treasure and knowing that I was willing to work for it. My work for more treasure began when ESPN soon contacted me to write a piece about my travels. Now, writing for ESPN was a massive opportunity, and I knew that I had to find another way to connect with their readership without being a professional athlete, rich, young, famous, good-looking, sponsored, or anything like that was featured on their network. So in going with Freud's out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength, I wrote with brutal honesty about my search for hugs, high fives, and smiles. That's it. And people loved it. People loved my honesty and embraced me through their correspondence. Almost immediately, I received emails from around the world with people sharing how they were inspired. One note I received months after the article was published was indeed a treasure. It was a note in a bracelet from a woman that said her mother had cancer and would reread my article every time she went to chemotherapy. Each reading of my story ushered in a smile, and the woman thanked me for living a life that brought her mother happiness during a painful time when nothing else ever did. And she informed me that her mother also had passed away and felt that she would want me to have one of her bracelets, and ended her note with, "Keep going." Putting on this bracelet on my wrist made me cry because I realized that I wasn't alone in this treasure hunt. Hugs, high fives, and good vibes was the life currency for others too. To celebrate this, I bicycled from San Diego to Philadelphia, adding the element of stopping each week to volunteer just a day at a local shelter or charitable organization. And it was beautiful. Each week I had a dialogue with a very different population who observed something different in me and in turn asked for something different from me. I returned home from that tour with a stronger sense of self and a stronger sense of purpose, and feeling like I had put on an old pair of jeans and discovered treasure in every pocket. Now, pockets full of treasure can make one feel fearless. So even though I had only written just articles before, just short articles, I wrote the book, Traveling at the Speed of Life. I bicycled across the United States again to celebrate its publication, but I treated this door differently by speaking less and listening more. And all I heard was, "You know you're not done, right?" Now, being hug wealthy but cash poor made this notion seem absurd, but the people were correct. And soon I found myself bicycling Australia for my first official Hug and High Five tour. Successfully bicycling from Sydney to Melbourne, volunteering at a few charities, and embracing over 1,000 people in less than a month was a huge step for me. And I attempted to replicate this experience by pedaling across the United States in 2016, but a sinus and ear infection stopped me. But at this point, really, nothing could stop my treasure hunting. That summer, I instead drove across the country, deliberately seeking out people to hug that didn't look like me, didn't think like me, or vote like me. And I was aggressive at it too, embracing a scary dude with a few tattoos in that Nazi-esque font that we've seen a bunch of times, and even embracing some people wearing Confederate flag clothing. I was determined to create good moments in the country and felt accomplished by the tour's end. But when I returned, the Pulse nightclub massacre had just occurred, letting me know that there was still so much more for me to do. So I traveled to Orlando, embracing everyone I could, and the generated warmth carried me through to offer hugs and high fives and good vibes to people at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland and the DNC in Philadelphia and other places. And by 2016's end, I had embraced people in 31 states and wanted to forge ahead. So in 2017, I decided to be proactive and create good news for people by staging hug parties. My first hug party was on Valentine's Day at the country's geographic heart on Valentine's Day in Lebanon, Kansas, and it was terrific because I hugged 105 of the town's 195 residents. But what profoundly touched me was that a Wyoming man drove 400 miles just to get a hug. Wearing an expression of disbelief mixed with honor, I stood motionless as this man hugged me and he said, "I believe in what you're doing. Just keep going." This moment was so impactful that I later on partnered with Duke Cannon Soap Company in the summer of 2017 for the Big Dave Hugs America tour. And on that tour, I hugged and high-fived and positively connected with 13,986 people in 48 states in 77 days. The trip was a bounty of treasure that left me ever hopeful, and I continue to build upon that energy by offering hugs of support after the shootings in Las Vegas, in Sutherland Springs, and the shooting in Nashville. Some people thought that this would be all a passing fancy, but I've continued staging hug parties throughout North America, Europe, and Israel with the hope of doing more. But then 2020 happened. COVID, uncertainty, forced unemployment, fear-mongering, quarantines, social distancing, murder, protests, riots, intense political discord, lions, tigers, bears, oh my. Seemingly overnight, the entire world was thrust into a world devoid of hope and brightness. Some things like Zoom calls allowed us to see each other and be somewhat productive, giving us glimmers of light, but it wasn't nearly enough. Each day, there was another birth, another death, another wedding, and other major life events that passed by, yet weren't complete until there was a hug of congratulations, comfort, consolation, or community. Every day of 2020 solidified the realization that our COVID year was much worse than 9/11 because it snatched from us the very thing needed to ease our pain and anxiety. And that's human connection. We also learned that there's no app or hashtag or virtual reality platform that could ever replace a simple hug, regardless of how clever. Soon people from around the planet began messaging me, wondering that the current societal climate, they wondered if that would kill my hug business. It was incredibly touching for people to be concerned about my hugs and my efforts. But with social distancing, I was sidelined from doing what I did best at a time when the world needed it most. Or was I? One of my old bosses always used to yell at me, "Dave!" I actually used to say, "Sylvester, there's no excuse for doing nothing." He used to yell that to me all the time. And that mantra must have taken hold in my psyche because isolated on my porch, I scoured my memory and began furiously scribbling down short hug stories from my travels. I wrote stories that I believe would make any reader laugh, cry, and feel the hope and warmth and happiness and humanity missing from our lives. I essentially wrote stories that would make anyone smile. Writing about these moments inspired me to come up with another trip, and I came up with the Smile with Big Dave tour. On this tour, I drove the continental 48 states, doing good deeds for people in each state, masked and socially distanced, to create one more smile in the world. Many called me foolish for doing this tour, and I was admittedly fearful of COVID, but living in a world where hugs and human contact were scarce yet crucially necessary scared me even more. The emotions I encountered were real and raw, from speaking to a North Carolina man who couldn't attend his own brother's funeral, to meeting an Oregon woman with with cancer who doubted if she would ever get to hold her newborn grandchild overseas, and more. By the time I completed my 12,000-mile trip on January 5th, 2021, I felt good about helping people smile, but I needed some rest. I was actually looking forward to quarantining for a while because it would allow me some time to write and share my uplifting stories. But instead, I sat riveted to the television, looking at the horrific events playing out at the Capitol. Now, to live a life that has allowed me to travel throughout every state in 42 countries and seek out and embrace 500,000 people, ranging from newborns to people as old as 101, has been an honor. It really, really has. Each encounter has allowed me the privilege to focus on the promise and the potential of who we can be. But my memories of America that I've had, the good memories, violently clashed with the grotesque ugliness playing out at the country's heart. And my attempt to reconcile those two images brought me to tears. It also made me rethink the treasure metaphor that I've often used, and I thought, treasure is too trite, much too trite, and much too ephemeral of a description. Traditional treasure hunts for money or fame or any kind of tangible treasure generally corrupt a person and appeal to one's worst qualities. But to acquire just one more piece of hug treasure, I've had to evolve in every way possible to become more professional, more productive, more approachable, and even more open and honest. In many ways, acquiring just one simple hug has been my portal for becoming a better man. Hugs are so much more than a simple treasure to me. Hugs are an essential part of a happy life and the best part of who we can be. While it was painful to watch TV on January 6, 2021, it didn't dissuade me at all. Seeing the insurrection strengthened my resolve and convinced me to not stop hugging people until you see the world as I see it, full of smiles, full of promise, and full of potential. So read some of the 99 stories on these pages and join me in embracing others. Start with your family at first. Get comfortable. Then expand your hug circle to your friends. And then offer a hug and high five to someone you don't know. Do this so we can all walk away with a shared smile and a joint mission of making the world just one hug at a time. Thank you so much for picking up this book, and enjoy.